talk this morning about the problem of income inequality in the United States. This is a term that's thrown around a lot these days, but I feel like some people might not know exactly what it means or exactly what the problem looks like. So first of all, what does income mean? Income is the amount of money received, usually on a regular basis, for work, goods or services provided, or things like personal investments. The most basic example of this would be a paycheck you receive from work every 2 weeks. Usually income is measured in terms of households, so number of families. So what is income inequality then? Income inequality is the extent to which income is unevenly distributed among the American population. Over the last 4 decades, since the end of the 1970s, the share of the nation's total income received by higher income households has been rapidly increasing. This has left smaller and smaller amounts for lower and middle class households, which comprise the vast majority of the American population. To look at this from a different angle, let's imagine the problem from a different perspective. Let's imagine the problem was sharing a pie for dessert after dinner. The number of slices available to the middle and lower class households, the vast majority of the American population, has been getting smaller and smaller. So you can see the problem here. There's increasingly less money available to be earned and then spent by the majority of the American population. That's what I mean by income inequality, this economic squeeze. To illustrate the scale of the problem, I want to share a few numbers. Currently, 3 of the wealthiest people in the United States own more wealth than the bottom 50% of the United States population combined. That's 3 people, household names: Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, and Warren Buffett, who own as much money as 160 million Americans. That's according to the Institute for Public Studies. Furthermore, in the United States, right now, the top 1/10 of the top 1% own as much wealth as the bottom 90% of the country's total population, according to a paper by the National Bureau of Economic Research. That's 0.1% of the United States population owns as much money as the lower 90%. To illustrate that, here's a scale. Here's a picture that kind of illustrates the scale. Imagine each of these dots represents a person or a family. That one dot at the top of the page owns as much money as these 900 dots have to share amongst themselves. Based on these numbers I've just shared with you, and their extreme disproportionality, there's no reason anybody in our country should be hungry. There's no reason anybody in our country should be homeless. And there's no reason anybody in our country should lack adequate health care. Obviously, there should be enough to go around. It's ridiculous that we, as the most prosperous country in the history of the world, have the highest rates of income inequality among any developed nation. So why isn't there enough to go around? There's many different answers to that question. These include things like the low federal minimum wage, extreme federal spending, and the prohibitive cost of higher education. But I want to focus on just one. That's our current federal income tax policy, and how by reforming that, we can help reduce income inequality in the United States. First of all, I'd like to take a step back and examine exactly what we need our federal taxes for. What are they used for? What do we like paying them? But we do need them. First of all, federal income taxes go to support our Social Security system. This provides retirement funds, survivors' benefits, and disability payments for the older citizens of our country. According to TurboTax.com, Social Security constituted about 23% of the federal budget in 2014. Other things include our major healthcare programs like Medicare, Medicaid, and the Children's Health Insurance Program. This constituted about 25% of the federal budget in 2014. Next, we have defense and security. This includes the Department of Defense, which oversees our armed forces, as well as Homeland Security, which is also supported by federal income taxes. These accounted for roughly 18% of the federal budget in 2014. And lastly, we have the safety net programs, things like unemployment insurance, food stamps, and low-income housing assistance. So, as much as we all dislike paying taxes, it's clear that they're a practical necessity for the continued success of our country. This whole thing wouldn't work if we all didn't pay federal income tax. But the question is, are the right people, the right socioeconomic group, responsible for bearing the heaviest burden for supporting these federal entities? In the United States, we have a federal income tax policy that's progressive. That means the more you make, the more you pay in taxes. Here's a couple of examples of 2019. So say you make $50,000 a year. This year, 2019, you're expected to pay somewhere around 23% of that income federal taxes. Let's say you make $100,000 a year. You're probably looking at paying around 25% of your income in taxes. At first glance, this policy seems pretty reasonable. The more you make, the more you pay in taxes. It seems pretty fair. But let's take a closer look at the numbers. Let's go back to the example where someone's making $50,000 a year. Let's call her Jane. Jane, as I said, is responsible for paying about 23% of her income. Now let's look at someone who's making $500,000 a year. Let's call him John. John is taxed at a rate roughly around 35%. John pays 12% more than Jane when he does his taxes this year. That means while John makes 10 times more per year than Jane, he's being taxed at a rate that is less than twice that of Jane. In fact, John is taxed at a rate of roughly 1.5%, rate Jane is responsible for. Let me say that again. The person who makes 10 times more is paying less than twice the rate as someone who makes 10 times less. Clearly, our country's federal tax rates do not keep up with the income levels. Is it justifiable to be putting more of the tax burden on somebody who makes $50,000 a year than somebody who makes $500,000 a year? Or $1 million a year? The super wealthy, also known as the 1%, are not paying their fair share, and they haven't been for a long time. It's been putting more of an economic burden on the rest of us. But our country's federal tax policy hasn't always been so one-sided. As you can see here, this is a graph of tax rate of the 0.1% and the 0.1% of the American population. And since about 1945, it's been plummeting to roughly 50% where it was the middle part of the last century. Now resides somewhere around 30%. This has had the effect of making our country's federal tax policy less progressive, meaning that everyone pays closer to the same amount, regardless of income. According to the Congressional Budget Office, this increasingly less progressive tax policy has contributed to an increase in after-tax income inequality, meaning the folks who are making $500,000 a year or $1 million a year are shouldering less and less of the federal tax burden than the people who are making $50,000 to $100,000 a year. More burden is being placed on lower and middle-class Americans to support programs like Social Security, Medicaid, and our armed forces. This is not right. We as Americans need to take a closer look at exactly where the heaviest burden of our federal tax policy should lie. Should that be with Jane, who makes $50,000 a year? Or should that be with John, who makes $500,000 a year? To slow the rising trend of income inequality in this country, we need a more progressive tax policy, not a less progressive tax policy. We must reverse this trend. By implementing a more progressive tax policy, Funding for the federal government would not only increase, but help shift the heaviest burden off of the majority of the American population, middle and lower classes. According to the Tax Policy Center, the 1%, that socioeconomic group I've been talking about, comprises around 1.1 million households, each earning an average of $2.1 million per year. Raising this group's federal tax rate by 5%, so according to 2019 levels, that'd be 40%, would raise $157 billion in federal revenue in the first year alone. If this group's rate were raised to 45%, an extra 10%, it would bring in $276 billion in the first year alone. This is more money than the $47 billion needed to make all our country's four-year colleges and universities tuition-free for undergraduate students. This is more money than the estimated $176 billion the Federal Highway Administration needs to repair major urban highways around the country. We could make these things happen, and more, without raising taxes a dime for lower class and middle class Americans. All we need to do is consider this question. Is the heaviest burden of our federal income tax policy currently being placed on the right shoulders? In conclusion, income inequality in the United States has been on the rise since the late 70s. That's 40 years. It continues to get worse each and every year. This is a problem that affects all of us, or at least those of us who are making less than several $100,000 a year. One solution to this problem is to shift the burden of federal income taxes off of the lower and middle class Americans by raising the tax rate on the 1%. Those households earning an average income of $2.1 million a year or more. That group, the 1%, has managed to cut their tax rate in half over the last 60 years. They've done this. They've made this happen. And they've done this through one thing, and that's legislation, at the federal level and at the state level. It's passing laws. To reverse this trend, we need to do the exact same thing. We need to pass laws at the state and federal levels. So I urge you to consider, to really think, which politicians are in your corner? Which politicians have your back? And which politicians will be working for you? And I want you to keep that in your head over the next 2 years. Thank you.